All right, well, it looks like that's just about everyone. Mark, if I could just get you to advance the slide. Before we begin, I just want to go through a couple quick points. Welcome everyone. Hope you and your families are all in good health and staying safe. Thank you so much for joining us. Just some housekeeping. We're going to be doing a live Q&A at the end of the webinar, so please feel free to submit questions via the text box in the control panel, just the drop-down marked questions. We're going to get to as many as possible within the hour. If we don't get to your question in the allotted time, we will follow up after the webinar is completed. All questions will be addressed anonymously. Just a quick disclaimer. All information discussed in this webinar is for education purposes only. It should not be used or applied directly to the administration of any particular file or claim. This webinar is being recorded and we'll be posting it on our website, LinkedIn, YouTube pages, so please feel free to pass it on to your colleagues or use them in team training meetings if you wish. We'll also be sending each of you a completion certificate following the email. If you're experiencing any technical difficulties, you can either email webinar@origin-and-cause.com or you can just submit your problem or query in the question box in the control panel. So let's get started. Mark, if you wouldn't mind, next slide. So today's webinar is on fuel burning equipment fires, and so speaking on the subject is Mark Mason. Mark is a fuel specialist and a certified fire and explosion investigator here at Origin and Cause. He has over 20 years of experience in the hydrocarbon fuels industry. That includes time with the provincial downstream hydrocarbon regulator in Ontario and Alberta Energy Regulator, where he specialized in pipeline inspection and failure investigations. He has completed over 125 explosion and fire investigations involving natural gas, propane, fuel oil, diesel, gasoline, hydrogen, digester, and landfill gas. And he has expert knowledge of all Canadian codes and regulations with respect to hydrocarbon fuels. So without further ado, I'm going to hand things off to Mark. Mark, please take it away. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Or afternoon, I suppose, in this vast country that we live in, across a number of time zones, I suppose. I just wanted to go through with you just some failure mechanisms and fires in Canada involving heating equipment or fuel-fired equipment. Just as a background as to what some of the top causes of fires in Canada are. Cooking and cooking equipment, you know, they're about 46% of the fires in Canada. Heating equipment comes in second at 16%, followed by electrical, intentional or incendiary fires at 9 and 8% respectively. Smoking at 5%, which, you know, I've done a number of smoking fires lately, and you'd think that number would be higher, but it sits at 5%. So all other fires are at 16%. So with regards to heating equipment and hydrocarbon fueled equipment, it's a significant portion of the fires that happen in Canada. That has to do, I suppose, with our climate and our environment that we live in. Heating is mostly, throughout most of the country, is required most of the year. I'd say probably 7 to 8 months of the year. We're requiring some sort of heating equipment, and you know, the heating equipment is not confined to just heating the home. It's also heating water. There's a number of commercial applications that run into that. So yeah, it's 16% of the fires in Canada. So the most common cause of heating equipment fires, you know, very few heating equipment fires are due to malfunctions. Now, there are, you know, certain manufacturers have, you know, certain difficulties or challenges with some of their equipment, and they do malfunction. It's not, I'm not saying that they don't, but the majority of the ones that I have been involved with tend to deal with maintenance issues. And when I talk about maintenance issues, I'm talking about regular cleaning and general maintenance. You know, there are some service issues that come into that, but normally it's, the maintaining of the equipment would probably mitigate a lot of these fires. Clearance to combustible issues normally involves either the installation of the equipment, or once the equipment has been installed, the user of the equipment, putting combustibles too close to the equipment or the venting, which causes some of the fires. Venting of cracked vents and blocked vents, this normally has to do with carbon monoxide incidents, or incidents where the venting is too close to combustibles and you get cracked or blocked vents. Blocked vents, when you have a blocked vent, you can have the flames coming out the bottom, and we'll go into that a little bit later. When the flame exits the bottom of the equipment and ignites any combustibles that would have been in the area around the equipment. So it's not just carbon monoxide incidents. It does have to do with the actual fire escaping the heat exchanger of the equipment and igniting combustibles. So almost all heating equipment fires are preventable if proper maintenance or installation procedures are followed. The type of maintenance and interval between maintenance, that is manufacturer specific normally. Now, most manufacturers have at least a yearly maintenance schedule incorporated into their instructions that they leave with the equipment. It doesn't usually go past a year, and in some instances it can be down to 3 months. There are certain pieces of equipment that they give you a month by month what you should be doing with that equipment. That is not normal, and in most instances that would be very specific equipment, I would think. But when we're talking about maintenance, we're usually talking anywhere from 3 months to 1 year intervals. So the type of maintenance and what is required, excuse me, sorry, they're included, but they're not limited to any of these. So I've just given you kind of a laundry list of what is required. You remove and clean burner and manifold. So when I'm talking about the burner and manifold, the manifold is the valves and the operating equipment that delivers the gas to the burner. They normally come out fairly easily with, a technician who's been doing this for a while can usually get those out fairly quickly. And cleaning those is essential when you're doing the maintenance. You inspect the venting and check for blockages and perform venting check on atmospherically vented equipment. So when I'm talking about atmospherically vented equipment, you're taking air from inside the building, and it is assisting with the venting of the equipment to outside air. So on older equipment, you're going to normally see a draft hood that's on top of the equipment. Most water heaters that are installed now, they still have a draft hood on the top, or a draft diverter, and they use interior air inside the home to make sure that the venting it goes up the chimney properly. You clean the heat exchanger or boiler fins, tubes, or refractory. So the heat exchanger is part of the system where the gas or the oil or whatever you're burning burns in. It normally requires a certain amount of cleaning, not a lot. If the equipment's been operating properly, you wouldn't really get too much on a heat exchanger. Boilers are different. Boilers require you to clean in between the fin tubes or refractory. These are normally fin tube equipment is older. A lot of the equipment now is moving to high efficiency boiler systems, where they still do have fin tubes in them, but they normally require treated water going through them. So you still need to go in and clean those out regularly. It's a little more labor intensive when you're doing it on high efficiency boilers. So you check all safety and limits and record the setting of the limit controls. That's just automatic on every maintenance. You're making sure that the safeties work on every piece of equipment. You check the inlet gas pressure and manifold pressure that the gas supplies within the manufacturer specifications. Now, manufacturers have specific gas manifold requirements for their equipment. It's not just 3.5 inches gas, you know, going into the manifold to the burners. A lot of them are down to 2.1, 1.8. So, you know, the amount of gas that's going into the heat exchanger to be burned in the burners through the orifice is dependent on the manufacturer, and normally, you know, it's less than 3.5 inches water column, which is used to be the norm, but it isn't anymore. So you check the heat rise on forced air appliances, that the heat rises within manufacturer specifications. You can also check that on the boilers for pump controls. You're normally making sure that the efficiency of the equipment is working properly. If you have too high of a fan speed on some of these pieces of equipment, your efficiency goes down because you're not picking up the heat off the heat exchanger, and you can adjust that. So the heat rise is actually on the manufacturer's rating plate, and you just have to check to make sure that the heat rise is within the numbers that they're giving you on the rating plate. So you lubricate and oil all moving parts of the equipment, you know, pumps and motors. A lot of the new equipment doesn't require it because they have sealed motors, but some of the older equipment still does require lubrication and oil. You check for gas leaks on any portions of the equipment. This is normally when you put it back together after you perform the maintenance. This is vital. Every single time you have to make sure normally if you've been a technician in the field for a while, you have a checklist that you go through, and one of them is, you know, is everything gas tight, and making sure that there's no leaks. So after you've finished all of the maintenance equipment, you would do a flue gas analysis with electronic equipment to determine the firing characteristics of the equipment. So this would be a piece of equipment that you can purchase as a technician. You normally would have it with you, and you would put it into the vent of the equipment, and it would give you all kinds of information as to the efficiency of the equipment, what the vent temperature is, what the delta T temperature is. There's a lot of information in that, and I would be asking for that type of information if an incident occurred. So I'd like to think that a lot of the service technicians or service companies are doing these things now. I'm not sure how that's working out, but I'd like to see it. So you test fire the equipment after reassembly for operational purposes. That's just automatic. And you document the service and maintenance performed with numeric documentation for gas manifold reading and limit settings. So just because you've checked the limit doesn't mean you put a check mark there. You put a number as to what the limit is operating at. Same for the gas manifold. It's not a checkbox. Check boxes, you know, are fine, I guess, for some things, but when you actually are checking a number, that number should be on the service and maintenance record. It makes it easier down the road, especially for technicians if they have that on their documentation to say it was operating within the specifications when they left the equipment. So most of these maintenance requirements are done on a yearly basis. However, manufacturer's instructions will dictate the maintenance intervals required. So all of that being said, you need to have trained and competent service personnel doing the actual service on the equipment and the maintenance. The gas code is clear on this, that personnel performing installation, operation, and maintenance work shall be properly trained in such functions. Each jurisdiction will have its own kind of requirements for this. This is a catch-all kind of section in the gas code, which says that, you know, people have to be trained. It doesn't specifically say for jurisdictions, say in Manitoba or Alberta or Ontario or BC or any other jurisdiction across Canada as to what their requirement is. Like I said, different jurisdictions require certification to conduct certain service and maintenance functions, and normally that is contingent upon, you know, you have completed some sort of training program that is approved by, you know, provincial legislation, normally checked up by a provincial regulator that the certification is adhered to. On top of that, technicians should be familiar with equipment that they're working on. So a technician shouldn't just be going to the equipment and this is the first time he's seeing it and working on the equipment. He should reference manufacturer's instructions and documentation, which would give him a better idea of what is required as far as proper maintenance function intervals that are needed for that equipment. That is not normally done. I would encourage almost every technician to do that nowadays. The equipment that's coming out now can be fairly challenging with maintenance and service. So every manufacturer has different requirements, and the technician should be familiar with the equipment prior to initiating service or maintenance on that equipment. So some of the key takeaways from this, manufacturer's instruction and maintenance requirements are vital to the proper maintenance of the equipment. Manufacturer's instructions should be reviewed and consulted before a maintenance program is implemented and prior to commencement of the maintenance. So certification and training is required by the B149 National Gas Code. Different jurisdictions have certification requirements for this service and maintenance of workers. So each jurisdiction, like I said, will have basically it's a grading system. So people are allowed to work on equipment up to 400,000, and that's usually the number, the 400,000 number. And then it goes up from there. A lot of different jurisdictions have a lot of different categories for maintenance and service. So you'd have to check your individual areas of the country to make sure that they're working within the proper certification. Documentation of the maintenance performed should be supplied to the owner of the equipment and kept on file with the maintenance provider. So this has to do with making sure that the owner has a copy of the maintenance that was done, and then that should be kept with the maintenance provider. Normally they're going to keep that around for a few years, probably 2 or 3 years anyways. I don't know how long they should keep it. That would be, I guess, with specific to the service provider. So it's important that they have it on file though. So case study 1, this is a Super 8 motel in Manitoba. 46 people got sick with carbon monoxide poisoning. This was a couple years back in Manitoba. So this hit the mainstream media. I believe CNN and MSNBC and Fox News in the States actually picked this up as far as reporting on it. So 52 people were evacuated from a Super 8 motel in Winnipeg. It was discovered that carbon monoxide was the problem. It was not a gas leak. So there's a difference between the two. A carbon monoxide poisoning, yes, it is a gas. However, it's not a natural gas leak. It's carbon monoxide which is burned in the equipment and has escaped the venting action of the equipment and leaked into the living space. So long story short on this one, a lot of people went to the hospital, including a dog. Went to the hospital in Winnipeg. I guess animal services took care of that dog. But the important takeaway from this is that the equipment was not maintained properly. It had very little maintenance done to it, if any. When we pulled the top off of that piece of equipment, it was plugged up entirely, the boiler system. And that's the reason why there was other issues as well as improper maintenance on the equipment. But the main thing was that there wasn't any maintenance done on the equipment, and that caused the equipment to malfunction and leak into the space, and that's what caused 56 people to be sent to the hospital. Like I said, it was picked up by the international media because of the hospitalization of so many people. This has lasting effects on a corporate image. If somebody during that time or even now, if you punch in Super 8 motel and you're just looking for a hotel room for the night, this may pop up on your Google search. So people may think that, you know, maintenance on the equipment is not as important, but, you know, when you have an incident like this, because they haven't had the maintenance done on the equipment, it caused this international incident where you're getting media coverage that you're really not wanting. And I'm sure that this is going to, there's going to be litigation in this. I haven't seen anything on it yet, but I'm assuming it's going to come down the pipe, and people will be suing as part of either a class action suit or individually. So the case study 2, this is also in Winnipeg. I'm not picking on Winnipeg, but it involved a gentleman who was working in a building. He actually owned the building, and he had contracted the company that was doing the maintenance on the equipment. They were having some issues with the equipment, and they had 3 service technicians in there within a period of a month to try and fix this problem. There were people who were complaining about dizziness and headaches and all kinds of things going on within the building. This was not properly diagnosed or taken care of by the maintenance company, and it resulted in the gentleman who owned the building, he died because of carbon monoxide poisoning. They initially thought it was a heart attack. After they ran some tests and the coroner got involved, they determined it was carbon monoxide that caused this. It was caused by a blocked chimney on the roof of the building. So there was a number of other problems with the installation, but the main problem was that the person who was going to do the maintenance and service on this equipment did not properly check to make sure that the equipment was venting properly, and it resulted in carbon monoxide leaking into the space and caused the death of this gentleman. It's a very sad story. Well, you know, like I said, at least 3 service calls were made by the maintenance company to the building, and none of them picked up on it. So the maintenance wasn't being performed also by according to the certified manufacturer's instruction or the maintenance agreement that was signed with the deceased. So the service company was on the hook for that. The widow, took action with a wrongful death legal action. I wrote a 15 to 16 page report on this, and it was settled out of court. I guess one of the key takeaways you should take from this is that if there is an incident where it's involving a fire or carbon monoxide incident involving heating equipment, you should get a fuel expert involved immediately. It's easier to get things sorted out at the time that this happens, rather than down the road when you're going to have to piece everything together at the end. We were able to do that because it was documented very well by the fire commissioner's office in Manitoba. So we were able to get a bunch of information after the incident. So my takeaway to you on this is get a fuels expert involved immediately if you know that the equipment is going to be in question as to the cause of the fire or the incident. So we got another case study here. This is just basically a picture of a piece of equipment that is totally clogged up with lime and debris. The equipment was never ever cleaned from the time it went in. So we're looking at right there, you're looking at probably, I'd say 10 to 15 years of buildup in that boiler, which created a carbon monoxide incident in this case. It's it's vitally important when I'm talking about cleaning the boiler. I'm talking about those fins that you see there with the green stuff on it. You have to get in there and clean all of those out. It's very labor intensive. It's not something that can be done, quickly. Normally on a boiler maintenance, you're looking at 2 to 3 hours to clean stuff like that out. And if it's clogged up like this, it could take even longer, and you'd have to put it through a chemical bath in order to get all the debris and the lime out of there. So I just wanted to include this to show you what can happen if the maintenance isn't done. So when fire is shooting out the bottom of the boiler, you have a blockage issue. Normally it's either a blockage in the boiler or it's a blockage in the vent. Now, if you have flame shooting out the bottom, you've got a carbon monoxide problem now, but you also have an instance where you can ignite combustibles that could be around the boiler. When you hear insureds or people who were there saying, yeah, I saw fire shooting out the bottom of the boiler, you can pretty much be assured that there's a maintenance issue with that boiler. It's not due to malfunction of the boiler normally. It's normally due to maintenance. So when you're asking people, when you're taking these claims on, or you're investigating this, you need to ask, how old is the boiler? When is it serviced and how frequently? Have there been any repairs or maintenance done to the boiler lately? And the name of the person and the company that did the work, because we're going to be checking up to make sure that the person who did the work is properly trained in the functions of doing that. So that's one of the key takeaways that you'd want to have. So we're into propane heaters now, and there's just some different kind of propane heaters there. The residential one on the left-hand side, you'll normally find those in a backyard patio setting or on a patio for a bar or a restaurant. The other ones are normally having to do with some sort of a renovation that's happening within the building, and all of them have their different maintenance and clearance to combustible issues. So I just wanted to point out to you that normally the one on the left there is a residential situation. The ones that are on the right usually have to do with a commercial industrial situation where you have some sort of a renovation happening where you need to put heat into the space that's being renovated. So this is a building site where a builder was using propane to heat the homes that were under construction. It resulted in, I believe, 4 homes actually, that were, 3 were totally devastated, and the 4th one in the background there, you may as well have said, they're going to knock that one down. So almost all of the homes were totally devastated from basically a propane heater that was looking like that. The propane heater was on the construction site and put on top of straw. I asked the builder before I went and looked in some of the other homes that he had under construction there, like, what were you doing with this heater? Like, was it in the basement? Nope, we usually put it on some sort of a non-combustible base, and the first home I walked into, I saw this. So you could pretty much be assured that this is how they were operating the propane heaters on the site. Luckily, nobody was hurt, and it was just basically buildings that burned down, but it could have very easily turned into a situation where, if there's homes under construction in the residential community that's under construction, that you could affect people who have already moved in and are next to a home that's being constructed next to them, and these heaters are in there being utilized in this way. So I just point this out that people who do this need to be properly trained in how to put these in, and if they aren't, they would be liable for any of the the damage that would come from one of these heaters being put on top of straw or not being utilized in according to manufacturer's instructions. So it's another thing that you have to keep in mind when you have a construction site where there's been a situation where buildings have burned down. You should get a fuels guy involved, because there's probably going to be some sort of auxiliary heat that was needed to heat the buildings. That's the construction heater in question, and you see how it burnt the concrete on the side there. What I believed happened is that it ignited the straw. The straw melted the propane hose, and the propane hose was now you're getting basically cylinder pressure out of that hose ignited into the basement. So it wouldn't take too long for that house to go up, and it would cause a great deal of heat in order to cause the damage to the concrete on the side there. So the most common causes of propane heater fires are clearance to combustible issues and hose connections and lengths. So the hose connections need to be proper for the piece of equipment that's being used. Torches are another issue with propane. A lot of builders or roofing companies use torches on flat roofs on the top of buildings. Those have to be when that torch is in use, that torch needs to be somebody needs to be there at all times. You can't just leave that torch going. So most of the time, the heaters aren't used correctly according to manufacturer's instructions, and clearance requirements are not being observed on a lot of these issues where the propane heater has caused the fire. All appliances fueled by natural gas, propane, or fuel oil require clearances around the appliance and the vent. So this is a clear indication of I've been to a number of these fires, just so you know, where the water heater has had clothes sitting around it, because normally the water heater is in with the laundry area of the home, especially the older homes. You're going to have the mechanical room and laundry room being in the same area of the home. So clothes get placed at the bottom of the water heater. Sometimes it's only a few clothes. There's other instances where a mom has 6 kids running around and they're all under the age of 10, and there's a lot of clothes that get put around the water heater at the bottom there, and it's very easy for those clothes to become burst into flames from the heat of the water heater at the bottom. Now, the flame doesn't actually have to roll out of here in order to ignite those clothes. The heat at the bottom there gets very, very hot. And over time, when clothes are jammed up against the bottom of the water heater, you can have those clothes smoldering for a little bit until they actually catch fire. So, like I said, I've been to a number of fires like this. These are totally preventable. It just has to do with, keeping things away from the bottom of the water heater. It's all about clearance to combustibles. So, just to make you aware, I'm sure that there's a lot of adjusters out there that have had, claims similar to this. So some of the key takeaways on this: these incidents happen frequently in residential claims involving renovations. Be sure to secure the evidence. So any of the heaters that would have been involved, and the propane cylinder, and the hose, if it's available. Normally the hose gets burnt pretty badly, but don't let the contractors or the insureds move or discard anything until an expert attends the scenes. It's harder to put things back to the way they were if somebody's in there, messing with them. Now, if the firefighter is going in there and there's a situation where they're, beating down the fire and they have to remove the propane cylinders, I get it. I understand that. That's, totally understandable. But, after the fact, everything should be left the way it was until we get there. It's best if you probably fence it off and don't let anybody get back in until an expert gets there. In construction-related claims, some of the questions you should ask: what was their method of heating the construction site? What kind of heaters were being utilized? Was the fuel natural gas or propane? Because a lot of the times the natural gas is in already, and they can use natural gas heaters inside these buildings. So you just have to be certain that it was either natural gas or propane. And this is important. Who was hooking them up? Like, who's doing the placement of the heaters and who hooked them up? I'm gonna, when I do an investigation like this, I'm gonna want to talk to that person to see, how knowledgeable they are in doing this, and whether they know anything about what the maintenance or the clearance requirements are of that piece of equipment. So when you get all this information, you need to make sure that that is all given to the investigator, so that I can follow up with the person who's actually putting these things in place and have a conversation with them about what they know about properly installing these pieces of equipment. That's just so everybody knows, that's a cylinder. That is not a tank. It says propane tank on it, but that is a cylinder. There's a difference between cylinders and tanks, and I won't go into it too much here. However, anything that's, when you're talking about a barbecue or a portable heater or anything like that that's being heated, normally it's heated by a cylinder. The gas being supplied to it is being supplied by a cylinder. It's not normally being supplied by a tank. So I know it says tank there. It's really a cylinder, just so you know the difference. I would say stop storing propane cylinders inside the home. This is a pet peeve of mine. I've actually gone into friends' homes and seen cylinders inside their garage, and basically taking the cylinder on my own out back or out into a shed area, and told them, look, please keep them out here, because I don't know if there's any firefighters here right now today, but this is probably one of the scariest things for a firefighter when they're beating down a fire and they go in and they see cylinders inside a home. These things can become rockets very quickly. Not only that, but the cylinders can leak from time to time, and now you've got a propane leak inside your home. Never a good idea, or never a good situation. So I would say, please take any propane cylinder that you have. If you get anything from this today, please go home and take your propane cylinders and put them outside. I mean, I hope you get something out of it today more than this, but at the very least, I hope you do this. This is one of the things that I would like you to get out of that. So when we're talking about fires, we're also talking about explosions with natural gas and propane. It's not as usual with propane. However, it can happen. But normally when you have a gas explosion, it's normally natural gas. This is a situation where it just devastated a home, and I believe this was in Kitchener, but I can't be certain. But yeah, it's basically a hole in the ground. This was from a gas leak from a pipe inside the home. So this is an illustration of how ubiquitous or everywhere that the gas is in your home. So it starts at the meter on the outside there on the left-hand side, and there's piping or tubing that's involved with bringing the propane or natural gas inside the home. So you've got a furnace and a water heater in that first picture. There's the first instance where you're going to have natural gas. You got a gas fireplace that may be in the main living or the upper living of a home, upper living area of the home. You've got gas cooking equipment inside the kitchen, which may have it. And then you may have a gas barbecue out back. This is becoming way more prevalent in a lot of newer construction, where they're putting in natural gas outlets at the back deck area of the home for natural gas appliance barbecues. So when we're talking about a gas explosion, all of these things are gonna have to be eliminated as a possible source of the explosion. You're not always able to do it very easily, but this is why gas explosions take so much time, is because you have to eliminate everything that's on gas in that home, and it's, like I said, it's not always easy to do. So causes of gas explosions would be faulty workmanship, contractor leaving leaks in piping, or improper installations. Underground leaks from utility piping. It's important to, when you're talking with the insured after an explosion like this, if there was any kind of maintenance work being done on the street or on adjacent streets to anything underground. They may have inadvertently hit a natural gas line, and the natural gas leaks through the leaks underground and into homes, and that's where you can get a leak happening and a gas explosion from that. So misuse of fuel, storage and use of propane cylinders. If you're using a barbecue inside the home, and you've got propane cylinders operating equipment, propane fired equipment inside the home, that's always not good and not a good situation and should never happen. So the wrong type of fuel for a type of equipment. So people tend to think that it's a gas appliance, so it can use propane or natural gas. Nope, you have to use either one or the other. It's not natural gas or propane. There are dual fuel equipment out there. Normally, it requires a technician to come in and change the orifices and the spring tension on the valves. So it's not something that you can just easily flip over on your own. It's something that should be done by a technician. And normally the equipment is labeled after it's done that this equipment has been switched over from propane to natural gas or vice versa. The other gas explosion types are self-inflicted, suicide attempts or criminal activity where people have tried to blow up a home for either the insurance money or they've got a beef with the person who lives there. So just a bit on gas explosion investigations. These investigations are incredibly complex because of how many gas appliance and fixtures there are in a typical home or building. I've mentioned that before. So each source of the fuel must be ruled out or ruled in as a source of fuel causing the explosion. So in addition to the fuel appliances, we need to consider compressed gas containers or aerosols that could be the source of the explosion. So it's not normally the case, but you can have it where you get an aerosol can or a gas container inside the home that doesn't have anything to do with natural gas or propane, that has blevied or caused an explosion of some kind. I've only had a few of those where that's been the case, but it does happen. Normally, these are victims of the fire or the explosion, and you can hear them popping after the fire gets going. But they still need to be ruled in or ruled out as possible source of the explosion. So some of the key takeaways that you should get from this is if you receive a gas fire claim, you should call a forensic investigator immediately. Regardless of the sub-row opportunities, you need to document the physical evidence or the lack of evidence to protect yourself from a liability standpoint. Questions you should ask: has there been any servicing done lately to the gas meter? Has there been any construction done on the street lately? Who was in the home? And has there been fatalities? The fatalities thing, I suppose, is you're going to know that immediately. But you're going to have a coroner involved and all the rest of it now when you have a fatality. So these type of investigations sometimes don't get handed over to the insurance company immediately. There's usually a 3 or 4 day wait while the fire department does their investigation, and perhaps maybe the coroner is doing something as well, or the police. So you're going to be involved from a situation of making sure that the scene is make sure the scene is policed properly so that it's not open to the public or anybody's coming in there. Just if you get an explosion thought, you should call a forensic investigator immediately. Even if that forensic investigator is not a gas or propane or explosion expert, you should call one immediately. They can usually get you in touch with somebody who is. So the maintenance of gas equipment can save lives. Just a recap of the importance of maintenance. The best and easiest way to mitigate problems with fuel burning appliances is maintenance. Almost all manufacturers of equipment have a maintenance section in the installation instruction, and most manufacturers require maintenance to be done on an annual basis. It's not normally going past a year. So every year somebody should be coming in and taking a look at gas equipment, furnaces, water heaters, fireplaces, anything that runs on a hydrocarbon fuel should be maintained usually on an annual basis. So I'll leave you with this. There was a Woodstock family of 4 that was killed. This was back in, I guess, late 2010, I think, or 2011. Although this fireplace did not start a fire, it managed to kill a family of 4 in Woodstock. The carbon monoxide filled the home and overcame all family members. This resulted in the requirement for CO detectors in the home due to a private member's bill in the legislature. This was the uncle of the woman who died in this, pushed this to basically call attention to carbon monoxide and carbon monoxide detectors being installed in homes. If the interesting thing is if this fireplace, and I'll show you a picture of it in just a second, if it had caused a fire, the family probably would have survived. They would have smelled something or whatever. The problem is that the fireplace was running, basically all night, and was producing CO at a level of, pretty close to 400 to 500 parts per million in the basement alone, just after a minute after we had fired it up afterwards. I actually had to have police detectives go in with carbon monoxide detectors and with scuba gear to actually do this test. And it got to about 400 or 500 parts per million in about a minute. That's the fireplace itself. So it's an older fireplace. It was probably, I'd say, at least 8 years old, maybe 9, 10 years old. No maintenance done on it. There was basically dust bunnies and everything all over the orifice of this appliance. The gentleman had turned it on because it was cool, it was chilly. He was watching the hockey game, cooked some popcorn, left it on for the night, forgot to turn it off, went to bed. The mother, everybody was up in the night because they were puking. That's a part of, the carbon monoxide incident, you get vomiting. So she had puke buckets by everybody's bed. She initially didn't know what was going on, but then she figured it out and tried to get to the door and didn't make it. So they found her body right by the front door. So even though she knew at the end that this was the problem, the carbon monoxide was just too much in the home, and it overcame her. So this was a direct result of no maintenance. If there had been a fire here, this family would still be around. If they had maintenance done on the equipment, this probably wouldn't have happened. So if I can leave you with anything today, please maintain your equipment and take your propane cylinders outside. That's it.
All right, thank you so much, Mark. There's Mark's contact info. I think usually we have a slide that says questions, but I think it's missing. So I'm sure everyone can just use your imaginations and pretend that says questions. And we do have a few, so we'll get to those right now. So I think this is related to the propane tank clearance issues. Why would a builder have straw on the floor of a residential building under construction?
Yeah, so the straw was there, basically the straw is there to, from my understanding anyways, to soak up any kind of moisture. It's also because there's a lot of humidity inside the home. So if they've got drywall that's trying to be finished in the home, the straw acts to actually soak up a little bit of the moisture.
Thanks, Mark. I think it's also, yeah.
This next question that they have about the bottom of the hot water tank usually have it covered. Yes, it does normally. They're not always in place though. I've been to a number of them where they've been taken off for some reason or another, or been knocked off, and they're not there anymore.
Yeah, that was I think slide.
Sorry, do you want me to move on or?
No, that's fine. Yeah, that covers that. Did you want to read them?
Yeah, so can the propane heaters produce carbon monoxide? Yes, they can. They are carbon monoxide factories. There has to be adequate ventilation within the places that they're actually put into. in order for them to be used inside that space. Again, manufacturer's instructions would point that out pretty clearly, that it should be in a well-ventilated space. So just for everybody's, so it says, further to the comment on cylinders inside the home, how about empty or just about empty paint cans? I guess I'm not a paint can expert, but I would say probably having paint cans in the house is not a big deal. I would say a bigger deal might be varnish or stain. That is anything oil-based, I suppose, you might want to store outside. That's probably not a bad idea. Candles are a big problem too, I agree. That was one of the first ones that came in. I agree. I've been to a number of fires involving candles, and yes, they are a big part of the problem. So, but yeah, if you have empty varnish cans or empty stain cans, I would also keep those outside. Large boats must also be a problem.
I think it's a two-part one, and I think this came in during the gas explosion.
Right. Yeah. No, I never thought of that, but you're absolutely right. They have barbecues attached, and yes, they can be a problem. Again, making sure that you're utilizing those things appropriately and turning it off afterwards always is a good idea. What is the preferred method for outdoor barbecue, natural gas or propane cylinders? What is distance from building barbecue should be during operation? Now, the manufacturer's instructions are going to be pretty clear on this. Usually it's 36 inches from any combustible material. It's got to be 36 inches normally on almost every barbecue. The propane cylinders need to be, far enough away from any opening into the building that if the relief valve goes off, it's not going to vent propane gas into the building. So that's about, I would say from a relief valve, it's 3 feet, I believe, for a relief valve. Waste oil heating appliances to mention. Yes, waste oil heating appliances, they were at one time, at least partially across this country, illegal. But I think they're coming back into vogue now again. They require an incredible amount of maintenance. This is one of the exceptions to the maintenance rules that I would like to point out. It's a very good question. Those waste oil heaters, like the amount of maintenance involved with them is almost not, it's not worth having a waste oil heater. A lot of them require monthly maintenance, and yes, you can use waste oil in them to burn it, but the amount of nasties that come out of the venting there, and they clog up quite easily, and you can have a fire from them very easily if they're not maintained properly. So I would say waste oil heating appliances, for adjusters, that if they know there's a waste oil heating, and this is normally doing when you're in a repair garage, you'd have a waste oil heater. You could have a waste oil heater in there. If there's a fire in the building from a waste oil from in a garage, that's one of the things you should be asking, like, was there a waste oil heater in there? Is the propane cylinder okay to be outside during winter, or where should it be stored during winter? Outside underneath a deck would be fine. Normally they're pretty benign when they're in cold weather like that. I would store it in a shed, even outside, away from the home. That's the best place for it. I would absolutely 100% put those cylinders outside. With popularity of camper vans and decommissioned ambulances, are you seeing increased exposures related to heating and cooking devices? Yeah, this has to do with fry trucks and all the rest of it. Fry trucks, you have to make sure that the equipment that you're utilizing inside these pieces of equipment, these mobile units, are actually approved for that use. I know in Ontario they've had some major problems with a lot of these. and they are requiring you to have an inspection by the regulatory authority prior to putting that stuff into use. So yes, it is, there is an increased exposure with that stuff just by the nature of how you're using it. So yeah, okay, so another way gas piping can be damaged is natural cause earthquakes, etc. Alaska had a berthing earthquake a few years ago, and I had several fires. Yeah, no, that's true. Normally, that's in older sections of the of a place where you still have underground piping that may be metal. Normally, the plastic piping tends to expand and contract fairly well, and they put enough of it in the ground that it actually is you're able to do that. I have had situations where you've had extreme temperature changes, and it has pulled the polyethylene out of the T. So yeah, you are right. There can be external factors that relate to the piping underground. That's that's a good comment. I have propane tanks on the deck and the direct sun heat an issue. Not normally, and it's a propane cylinder probably. You're not normally going to have a problem with that. It can be when it gets really, really warm and you've just filled it up. The portion on above the tank, there's only a certain amount there, so you could have a little bit of leakage coming out of the relief valve for that, depending on how hot it gets. There's a reason why normally these are painted white, so that it refracts the heat, the sunlight a little bit, so that it doesn't get so hot. There are occasions where you can have the relief valve go off. Normally it'll go off and then reset. It's not like it's going to continue to go off, but you're right. You can have. I would not put it in the direct sun. If you're using it on the barbecue, normally it's not going to be a problem. Is there any national legislation making it mandatory for CO2 alarms along with the fire detectors in older homes? In older homes, I don't think it's grandfathered into older homes, and this is CO detectors, not CO2 alarms. CO, so just one oxygen atom there. You don't normally need them. It's recommended that you put them in, but any new home that's being built today will have a CO detector put into it. That is federal legislation. Kerosene portable heaters and their use particularly dangerous. It's been my experience that storage of that fuel is not treated as carefully as gasoline, diesel fuel. No approved containers that I'm aware of. Yeah, normally when you have kerosene heaters, you're filling up the reservoir for the appliance from just a jerry can, basically. There's not you don't normally have it coming right off of the jerry can. I have seen that before where they put the fuel line into the jerry can. That's a big no-no. Not supposed to be doing that. But so yeah, it's a problem. Kerosene heaters, I would say they're kind of like diesel heaters. It's very, very. I wouldn't recommend using that inside of a home as a portable heater. Now, that's not to say that in certain situations, especially in rural applications, that they're not used extensively, because they are. But the biggest problem you have with those is that you have to keep filling the reservoir for the tank in the heater. And normally the heater's hot while you're doing that, and you can have a fire happen fairly easily with spilled fuel. So the NFPA requires carbon monoxide detectors. Yeah, the NFPA requires carbon monoxide detectors in, I believe, newer homes. I don't know if it's required in homes. I don't think that's grandfathered in. It may, certain jurisdictions may require it, but I know it's required in brand new homes. All home with gas, wood, or oil, or if there is an attached. Oh, okay, I see. Yep. Okay. Yep. Have you had any incidents with CSST, corrugated stainless steel tubing failures in homes? Not directly. Can I point to anything? Normally it's with people who have had a problem where they've sawed through these things, not knowing that there's natural gas in there. So yeah, I don't not normally do you have a problem with these. You have had some where the fittings have leaked, and some of the time when people don't know what they're doing, they use different manufacturers' fittings on the same kind of CSST, and you're not allowed to do that. It's a system, and they require the same kind of fittings. So I haven't normally had any problems with corrugated stainless steel tubing, but that's not normally. It has to do with people sawing through them or damaging them somehow because they didn't know that there was gas in there. After what year did the CO detectors become required in homes? I can't remember what year the legislation came in. I'm kind of thinking it's around 2013, 2014, but I can't be 100% sure as to the actual date. I'd have to look that up for you.
You know, I just saw one come in just reminding us that it's now after 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so maybe that's a good place to end it. You will have the opportunity to submit a question or a comment after we end the webinar. You'll also be asked to answer a few questions, and we would really appreciate your feedback. So yeah, why don't we end it there? Mark, thank you so much for taking the time to do this presentation, and thank you everyone for joining us.
Yeah, thanks everyone.